Hello and welcome back. Thank you all for being here. If you like to cut past the sensational, the fluff in true crime, you have found the right place. And boy, am I glad you did. My name's Gavin. Thanks for being here. Tonight, we're going back to the Madeline Soto case. You guys know this case, but just as a little refresher, Madeline was 13 years old when she quote unquote disappeared on February 26th of this year from the townhome that she shared with her mother, Jennifer Soto, her mother's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Stephen Stearns, and two other roommates. Now, Madeline didn't just go off. She didn't run away. She wasn't trafficked. Well, not in the traditional sense anyway. What happened to Madeline, according to police, is this man, Stephen Stearns, killed her and then endeavored to cover up her murder. And as police were investigating that crime, they found that Mr. Stearns had perpetrated multiple horrific crimes over the course of at least 5 years against little Maddie Soto, because he had digital evidence of it on his phone, on his Google Drive, and so on and so forth. So tonight, we are going to focus a little bit on Jennifer, the mother. Now, if you guys will remember, a couple weeks ago, I did a live stream where we talked about the potential charges that Jennifer Soto could be charged with, crimes that she could be charged with, and what some of those, penalties might be. Since that time, I have had a couple of former prosecutors reach out to me. I've spoken with them. And then I've spoken to a couple of other friends and acquaintances of mine that are prosecutors or former prosecutors. And they have given me their arguments or their positions for why Jennifer Soto may not be charged. Now, I want to just be very, very clear about this. I have not spoken to any of the prosecutors in Osceola County, okay? This is a devil's advocate exercise when we're talking about the reasons why Jennifer Soto may not be charged with anything. This is a devil's advocate position, and I want to just bring that up because I noticed in the comments early on, there was a comment from Chester's mom, let me bring this up, that was like, I love this channel so much, but I cannot be here to hear Jen is not being charged when no one deserves it more than her. So Chester's mom, I'm not saying she's not being charged. I'm saying this may be the reason, or these may be the reasons why. The other thing that I want to, clarify, or just, what is that? Just as a caveat so that we're all on the same page, okay? I, Gavin Fish, humble YouTuber from Western Pennsylvania, am a reporter. That is what I am. I am not a lawyer. I am not, never have been, will never be a prosecutor, a defense attorney, anything like that. I have no experience. I have no education in it. What I am basing this on is my reporter's kind of curiosity in talking to people and getting clearer and clearer on the things that they're telling me. So, don't take this as like I'm some sort of expert on this, because I'm not. Now, all of the people that I've spoken with about this, well, I should say none of the people that I've spoken with about this have been able to come on the program. Number one, a couple of them are current prosecutors and they cannot do that. And then for the former prosecutors, there are other issues in their lives that preclude them from making public statements, even of opinion. So if you are a former prosecutor and you would like to come on the show and talk about this. Man, I would love that. That would be so much fun. And all you have to do is head over to my website, click on this little envelope right here, and that will take you to a contact form that will, you can fill it out, put your contact information, and I'd love to talk to you, and maybe we can have you on the show to have this conversation with somebody who is much better educated and prepared to have this conversation than yours truly, who I'm just a humble reporter. Okay, so I'm going to be, I normally will show you guys my notes and stuff like this, but I've just really kind of rapidly jotted them down, and I've organized them. But where we might start is backing up. There were 5 charges that I thought probably Jen could be charged with. Number 1 was failure to report child abuse. In the state of Florida, any individual who suspects or knows about child abuse is required to report it. Number 2, tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. So like if Jennifer Soto helped Stephen Stearns erase his phone, maybe something like that. Child neglect is certainly one that I thought that she could be charged with. Accessory after the fact is one that I thought that she could be charged with. And then conspiracy to commit a felony is one that I thought that she could be charged with. So now that we have that foundation, and I'm sorry, I am going to keep Jennifer's picture up probably more than normal on this because we're talking about her, but don't worry, we're victim centric here, so we'll get Madeline up there too. The first thing that I want to talk about is the burden of proof when it comes to criminal prosecution. There are 2 things that we need to keep in mind. Again, this is based on my conversations, okay? Number 1, there are 2 burdens, or I guess standards of proof that are used in the law. One is beyond all reasonable doubt. Now, that is used in criminal law, and in civil law, it is preponderance of the evidence. So it's a much lower bar. The preponderance of evidence basically means it's more likely than not. 51 to 49 that something happened, right? It's a much lower standard, whereas beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest level, the highest burden of proof, and that is what we're talking about here criminally, right? Now, we could have a second conversation about civil actions that could be taken against Jennifer Soto, but for today, we're going to be talking about criminal. Now, okay, key differences between the 2 different levels of burden of proof. In civil cases, the focus is on whether the defendant should have known that a crime was committed or that they acted negligently, right? But in criminal cases, the prosecution must establish beyond a reasonable doubt, must convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, not that the defendant should have known, but that the defendant did know and still willingly committed the crime, showing actual intent or knowledge. Now, that is known as, the legal doctrine there is called mens rea, or guilty mind. Okay? So, again, in a civil case, it could be argued that Jennifer Soto should have known about Stephen Stearns' behavior and the risks to her daughter. But in a criminal case, prosecutors would have to prove that she had actual knowledge of the abuse or harm and that she took no action to prevent it, or that she took action to facilitate it. And that is a much higher burden. Okay. Now, real quick, let me bring this one up. Because this is a devil's advocate kind of video that we're doing, or exercise that we're doing here, I really want to hear your disagreements with me. Okay. And you guys know on the channel, I like to show comments and have conversations about them. So if you disagree with anything that I am saying, tell me. Keep it respectful, and I will keep my answers respectful. But just use GF to get my attention in the live chat. That's how we do it here on the channel. And we'll have this conversation. Okay? Let's bring up Maddie. Let's stop looking at Jen for a second. All right. Let's go back to my notes. Okay. Challenges in this case, I think, in going through all of the reports that we have so far, the disclaimer being, of course, that we don't have everything. We only have the stuff that is public, right? Which is, I mean, it's copious. But in all of that stuff, there is no reference to direct evidence pointing to Jennifer Soto knowing knowing that something was going on or facilitating that something was going on. So without that proof, it would be really unlikely that Jennifer would face criminal charges. Very unlikely. But let's talk a little bit about mens rea. Again, this is just, I mean, surface deep conversation here. I don't know the law well at all as compared to a lawyer, but let's talk about mens rea. It is a Latin term that says, basically it means guilty mind. I think technically it says mind of crime, but it means that there's guilt in the mind, there's knowledge. It distinguishes between intentional acts and those committed unknowingly or negligently. Okay? So in criminal law, mens rea must align with what I think most lawyers call actus reus, but it's really actus reus, which is a guilty act, right? Not just a guilty mind, but those two things have to align. A prosecutor in a criminal case has to not only prove the actus reus, right, that there was a guilty act done, but also that they knew what they were doing was wrong. They don't have to know it's against the law. They just have to know it's wrong, as I understand it, right? And those two things have to align, right? And when those two things align, that's what establishes that criminal liability. Let's see. Yeah, it distinguishes between intentional acts and those that are negligent, right? So I think I've gotten over that. In Jennifer's case, prosecutors would need to demonstrate that Jennifer committed a criminal act. So like aiding and abetting abuse, neglect, covering up the crime, omitting a required act like failing to report the abuse, with knowledge and intent. And if there's no evidence of a clear act or a clear omission on Jennifer's part, then it weakens the case. And I think we can get into some ethics of this, like prosecutorial ethics, and I know that we will. But if a prosecutor looks at all of the evidence and says, I cannot prove mens rea, they're ethically bound. They may not bring the case. And there are some ramifications if they do. We'll talk about those. Okay? So how do prosecutors typically prove mens rea? Okay, well, there are a whole bunch of ways that they can prove mens rea. And we see these in trials all the time. Direct evidence. So if there were explicit statements where Jennifer Soto admitted that there was knowledge, that she knew what was going on, or that there, direct evidence where Jennifer Soto had said that she intended to act or omit, right? Direct evidence would do that. Witness testimony kind of comes into there, right? If there were witnesses or some kind of co-conspirator that witnessed that the defendant had knowledge of her actions. That's one way that they would do that. Circumstantial evidence sometimes plays a big role in establishing mens rea. So, for example, if they're acting a little bit differently after the crime than they normally would, say, or before the crime, say their phone is never off, but an hour before the crime is committed, their cell phone is turned off. And it stays off for several hours until they dispose of evidence, and then the cell phone turns on. That circumstantial evidence is strong evidence that would suggest a guilty mind, right? That there is a knowledge of guilt. That's one way that they would do that. Physical evidence. Sometimes there are items directly related to the crime. Like if there was a weapon used in the crime, that will be used to establish mens rea. Forensic evidence like DNA, fingerprints, other evidence linking the defendant to the act. So if I know this, well, I don't know. I'm sure this didn't happen. But for example, if during the forensic examination of Madeline's body, they discovered DNA on Madeline's neck where she had been strangled, and that DNA belonged to Jennifer, that would establish the guilty mind. Other ways are like emails, texts, social media, threats or statements. Sometimes they can use motive to establish mens rea. If Jennifer was going to benefit somehow financially, maybe through Madeline's death, then that might be used. And then sometimes they'll even use just expert testimony. And you guys remember we had Beth Meeks on. So forensic psychologists, for example, or there can be psychiatrists or other psychoanalytical or psychological analysis done, and an expert witness can give their opinion based on their observations of the defendant, that defendant has a guilty mind. So there are lots of ways to show mens rea. Now, in this case, I don't think that we have any direct evidence. We don't have admissions. Not that we've seen anyway. I'm not saying they don't exist, but we haven't seen them. We haven't seen Jennifer admit that she knew what was going on. We haven't seen any communications indicating that she knew what was going on, other than the Woody Allen comment. But I think that is one that is just a tenuous stretch. I really do. I mean, I think we all understand what it means, but I don't think that it would stand up to scrutiny under cross-examination. So that no direct evidence, no circumstantial evidence, no forensic evidence. We don't see any of that ties Jennifer to this crime. Again, Gavin's being the devil's advocate here. Okay, so those are my first two sections of notes. Let's take a pause. And let's close all these and come up here. Let's see what you guys are saying so far. See if I'm off base. Let me just refresh the comments a little bit. All right. I have no idea what my astrological symbol is, but I do love my family. Gavin, can Jennifer Soto still be charged with neglect for the SA? Well, I mean, if they can show that she had knowledge of something happening to Madeline. And let's think about, these are some of the things that were brought up to me. Stephen Stearns was not on like a sexual predator list. I think he did have a criminal past, but I don't think it's reasonable that she must have known about that. I think that criminal past happened when he was a juvenile. So, lack of criminal record, lack of being on a sexual abuser list. I think there are reasons for Jennifer to not to have known about the SA. I don't believe it. I think that she knew, but I don't think that there's enough evidence, and I think that there's enough that you could argue in the opposite way that might make a prosecutor go, maybe not bring these charges. Because remember, a prosecutor, they want to prosecute, but if they look at a case and they're like, I think that a defense attorney, if I were the defense, I would say this, that, and the other. I'm never going to be able to overcome those. They shouldn't bring the case, right? Good comment. Thank you, Gavin. And I know that you guys were making these before, like at the very beginning. But Gavin, does this mean that she won't be charged with anything at all? It doesn't. Doesn't mean that. This is just an exercise in devil's advocacy. Let me keep on going. Gavin, your last name is not off the wall enough for you to be a lawyer. That's funny. There is somebody in our area with my last name who is a pretty well-known legal guy. That's funny. Winona saying, Gavin got some of us riled up with that title. I did. It's a little clickbaity, guys. I admit it. It's a little clickbaity, but this is a good exercise to go through. Like, I think that these are, again, what is the purpose of the channel? My channel's purpose is to learn and to grow together. That's what we're doing. The purpose isn't to just all, agree all the time and as some like culty group. Yeah, we just don't want to be that. We want to be learners. We want to be students, and we want to dig in, right? We want to get into the nitty gritty. That's why I say that we do deep dives here. It's why we get into documents and with the occasional drillery, which this might be here. But yeah, I did it. I'm guilty, but I still think it's a good thing to do. Okay, Lynn, I don't know if you pronounce it Doherty or Doherty. I have seen it pronounced both ways. I'm going to say Doherty because that's the way it feels right to this California kid. Gavin, what about cases in the future involving, like, say, other Jen Sotos? Because they're out there, unfortunately. Can you imagine more mothers getting away with crud like this? The reality here is that, and it's a sad and tragic reality, is that there are thousands of them, tens of thousands of them. I mean, I see cases in my little area that I cover for my work. I see this kind of stuff all the time. I see it all the time. And, but I think the thing that we need to take into consideration, and this is very difficult to do. This is really hard to do, especially for us non-lawyers. We need to absorb into our minds that the most important thing in any of these cases is the fidelity of the law. The law must remain true, must remain, the only word I can think of is righteous. We know that it is not perfectly true. We know that it is not perfectly righteous, but the point of it is to create, is for the law to evolve to be a better law over time. And so we don't want, I think you guys would agree with me that we don't want to be able to pursue criminal charges against innocent people because we think they should have known about, they were doing something bad or somebody was doing something bad around them. Like, we could all end up in the hooskow if that were the case, right? No, we want the fidelity of the law. It fails us sometimes because we seek for that fidelity. But I deeply believe that that is the most important thing. And the wheels of justice grind slowly, right? I just saw a case that the Supreme Court of the United States decided to pass on. And I was like, we need the answer to this question. We need a ruling from the Supreme Court. But Justice Sotomayor, by the way, guys, you should all read SCOTUS blog every day. That is a daily visit for me. SCOTUSblog.com. I love reading everything on the Supreme Court, and I love reading their opinions. But when the justices decided not to hear the case, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, it's not that this question isn't important, it's that it hasn't been through court enough. We haven't seen this go from the lower courts up to the appellate level, up to the Supreme Court appellate level. And it needs to do that in order for lots of the little questions surrounding it to be answered before it makes it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And why is that? Well, because it is the law that is the most important thing. And every time the Supreme Court acts, it sets a precedent, which resonates throughout all of federal jurisprudence. Same thing happens in each individual state, right? I've probably yammered on a little too long about that. But you're right. There are current and there will be future Jen Sotos that, well, let's say there currently are, and there definitely will be future guardians of children who know what is happening to what crime is happening to their child and fails to report it and fails to prevent it. But they won't be prosecuted because that knowledge can't be proven. We know this. I personally hope that digital forensics is the future way to bust through that. Communications, texts, polos, whatever you want to call them, Snapchats, whatever the kids are doing, those are the things that are going to entrap a lot of these people that may have gotten away with it more easily in the past. Great question. I loved that question. Tiffany asked, Gavin, do you think Jen's not being charged due to that sheriff posting a photo of Madeline's dead body online? I really don't. No, I don't think that will affect the case at all. In fact, one of the prosecutors that I talked to, she pointed something out to me that I probably should consider more. And it is this. We live in a YouTube bubble. Me, you, all of us, we live in this YouTube bubble where we get so invested mentally, emotionally in these cases like Madeline's that we think that everybody else does too. And think of like major cases, Delphi, right? The Moscow, Idaho, the 4 poor Moscow, Idaho victims that Brian Kohberger is charged with their murders. These are like major cases. And we wonder, will they be able to seat an impartial jury? Because we live in this bubble where we are paying attention. But it is not, you'll be able to find people in Moscow that have no idea anything about the case. You will. And so the sheriff posting the photo, no, I don't. I know that the photo was posted, but I still haven't seen the photo. I have no idea what Madeline looked like when that photo was taken. So I don't think that it's going to have any bearing on the jury at all. I think they'll be able to find a jury. Great question. You guys have such good questions. Didn't Maddie tell a friend or someone that she did tell her mom about Stephen Stearns? I don't recall that specifically. I would love you guys to tell me more about that. Liz Fortes says, Gavin, does anyone know if Jen asked, no, begged, to see Stefan in jail to ask him in person what happened to Maddie? I know I would have asked to question him myself. Maybe he would tell her. To my knowledge, as far as all the documents I've read and the recordings and the video that I've seen, she is not asked to see Stefan. Great question. Crochet and Ivy Co. Gavin, I don't disagree. I think with all the drugs she was on and taking, that she was likely slept like asleep the last 7 years. Oh, she likely slept the last 7 years away, unless there was something that she needed to do for herself. I know that the drugs that she was prescribed are pretty powerful drugs that are prescribed to people with bipolar disorder. She says that they make her loopy, make her go to sleep. I have experts that have talked to me about that say, no, that doesn't happen. I've had experts tell me that does happen. So maybe she did. I personally find it impossible to believe that she didn't know what was going on. I'm still there. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Okay, a disagreement. Novel finds by Cassie. Gavin, I disagree because of the person you had on recently who was talking about how Stefan groomed Jen as well as Maddie. Yeah, that was Beth Meeks, right? So she has a criminal justice degree in forensic psychology. She is an expert witness. And she might be somebody who could interview Jen and might be able to testify for the prosecution that Jennifer had that knowledge. It's completely possible. Now, specific to Beth, I know that she works in defense cases, but you guys know what I mean. Yeah, I think you make a good point, Cassie. I think you make a good point that expert witnesses are one way that prosecutors use to prove mens rea. But if I were to quibble with that as a professional quibbler, if Jen was groomed, then she may not have known what was happening because he's all up in her head. Again, that's just a quibble. That's not like, I'm not saying I believe it. I'm just saying it's an argument that could be made. All right, let me just see if there are any more before let's see. Yeah, you got some great ones here. Got some really good ones. I'm looking for more disagreements. Nifty 50. Gavin, AI says, yes, in most jurisdictions, you can still be charged with child endangerment or failure to protect your child, even if you are unaware of the abuse occurring. I don't think that there's a prosecutor who would ever take that case. You might be charged by the police. You might. I don't think that there's a prosecutor that's like, the evidence shows me that she was completely unaware. And we're going to get into why. Okay, that's actually a great transition, Nifty 50. Thank you very much for that. Let's go. Let me go back over to my notes. And this next section of my notes is all about prosecutorial ethics. Okay, so Nifty 50 just did us a huge favor with this comment. Okay, so, okay, just surface level again, guys. I'm not a lawyer, but prosecutors have ethical obligations. Okay, they must pursue charges only if they honestly believe that there's sufficient evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, they have to believe that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, man, I almost got political here, but let me just, without getting political, let me just say there are a lot of cases that are happening right now in courts of law, or have been happening in courts of law, where I don't think the prosecutors could reasonably believe that what they're doing in bringing charges could get a jury to, and I'm talking the criminal ones, right? The criminal charges. Well, I guess they're all criminal. No, there are a couple civil cases out there, but anyway, the criminal ones. There's somewhere I'm like, I don't know if that prosecutor actually believes this. They're just doing it for political purposes. And remember that prosecutors are politicians. I think it's very dangerous. Not, again, going back to our fidelity of the law conversation. It's the law that's the most important, not the guilt or innocence of a particular defendant. It is the law that is the most important thing. So, so if they don't believe that they have evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and let me just go back and say, it's not that they believe something beyond a reasonable doubt. It's that they have the evidence to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is a very important distinction. But if they were to pursue charges knowing that they didn't have sufficient evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, that violates ethical standards. Now, what are some of the ramifications for that? Well, if you violate legal standards as a lawyer, let's say as a prosecutor, charges can actually be brought. Oh no, hold on. Let me back up. The charges that you do bring first can be dismissed by a judge on their face, or they can be dismissed, long as they go through the long process. A judge can finally just go, you don't have sufficient evidence, case dismissed. And the reason that I jotted that down is that wastes a lot of resources that we as citizens here in the states in which we live and in the United States, we pay for. So we definitely don't want prosecutors bringing cases willy-nilly. They have to do so ethically. The other thing that they can suffer is reputational damage. So like high profile failures really can harm a prosecutor's reputation. They can undermine people's belief in the fidelity of the justice system. And remember that district attorneys and state's attorneys are politicians that are elected. It can end up losing them their job just by being voted out. Weak cases can also re-traumatize victims, their families, without achieving any type of justice. And then breaching professional ethics can also lead to disciplinary actions, including being disbarred, meaning you cannot practice law again. What's a good example of that? There are a couple that I can think of. There are a couple of, one doesn't matter. It was Bill Clinton was disbarred, right, over perjury. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about prosecutorial misconduct. The one that I could think of was Linda Stanley, who she was the district attorney in Colorado who was disbarred after bringing murder charges against Barry Morphew without sufficient evidence. You guys remember that? And the crazy thing is, more evidence was found and he was eventually charged with murder anyway. But not before Linda Stanley was disbarred for bringing those charges against Barry Morphew. Why did she do that? Well, she was under intense public pressure to bring charges against Barry Morphew. The media it was a media circus. There was so much public pressure, and she is a public servant and an elected official. She felt she needed to bring the charges, but she knew, it is alleged, that there was not sufficient evidence, and that's what led to her disbarment. Guys, if you spend your entire life working toward and becoming a lawyer and making your living at it, and you lose that privilege, where do you go from there? It is very scary to every prosecutor. Okay. Yeah, there were, there were violations, alleged violations of failing to disclose exculpatory evidence, making improper statements to the media, mismanaging evidence, and then ultimately, it was dismissed. So that's one case. That's one. And then let's see. Let's move on to like the political and social optics here, okay? One of the things that was brought up to me by one of the prosecutors that I talked to was that families of victims are typically seen in the public eye as victims themselves. So, for example, think of, we're talking about Maddie Soto's case, but let's think of another case. I'm trying to think of another one that went all the way to trial. One isn't coming to mind, but if you think of there's a murdered child and sitting behind the prosecutor with their family is the mother, the father, the grandparents, all the uncles and aunts, the little school friends, all that stuff. That group of people is treated by us and by everybody as victims themselves, right? Their daughter, their granddaughter, their friend, their niece, their nephew, whatever was taken from them violently, we see them as victims because they are victims. And so this political optics thing, district attorneys do not like to bring charges against the mother of a victim because the public will automatically see that that mother as a victim. And unless you have really compelling evidence and that you feel that you can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt and you can show to a jury that this is not a victim, this is a monster, then you may be pressured not to bring those cases. Also remember that district attorneys are elected positions. And so I guess the opposite could happen, right? There could be enough public pressure that they do charge Jennifer Soto. But again, are we living in our YouTube bubble here? Do we think that they should because we are in this case, we're invested in this case? Is that what we're guilty of? Could there be hundreds of thousands or millions of other people that haven't been following the case, don't really know about it, don't really care about it? And those are the people that are voters for district and state attorneys. Could that be possible as well? That's pursuing unpopular charges could lead to somebody losing, like a district attorney, from not being reelected. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. The next thing that I want to bring up is admissible evidence. Okay. All right. This is really important, guys, and this is something that I don't know that we think about a lot. But let me start with a story. Okay. In the 1970s, in the town in which we now live, a woman was murdered violently. She was stabbed to death, and a transient man, a man who had been working in town and who had been having a relationship with the victim, was charged with the crime. When they went and arrested him in a neighboring state, they went through his house, they went through his garage, and they found all sorts of inculpatory, very, very powerful, damning evidence proving that he had indeed committed the crime. Then, because he had some money, apparently, he hired a very good lawyer, somebody who eventually made a real name for himself in the eastern states as a very good defense attorney. He was president of the Bar Association, all sorts of stuff. Was able to make that evidence inadmissible because the police had not warned him of his Miranda warnings. And this case happened not too long after Miranda v. Arizona. So it was an oversight that the police made. All they had to do was read him his Miranda rights, and all of that stuff would have been included in the case. But because they didn't, it was inadmissible, and they didn't drop the charges. They felt like they had a case, but they lost, and he was set free. And I mean, I'm pretty confident. I feel very confident that he murdered her. Anyway, in a case like Madeline Soto's, admissible evidence is paramount to a prosecutor deciding whether or not they're going to bring a case. They could say to themselves, they could put all the evidence in front of them in the case and just look at all of it and say, yes, I believe this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. However, I don't think that the judge is going to admit that evidence because of ABC, and I don't think the judge is going to admit that evidence because of DEF, or this evidence, and so on and so forth, until they finally look at the part where they're like, this is my admissible evidence. I don't think that I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that to a jury that they committed this crime. So in this case, I mean, the defense will be looking at everything, right? They will be looking at all of the factors that cause something to be admissible or not. And I'm talking specifically about Jen. Like, we've all been looking at the evidence about evidence pointing to Stephen Stern's guilt. And I think we're all confident. I think prosecutors are confident. I think his parents are confident that that he is going to go away for the rest of his life. But for Jen specifically, if a prosecutor looks and goes, okay, here is all the evidence pointing to mens rea, for example, guilty mind, consciousness of guilt, looking at all this stuff, that one does, but it's not going to be admissible because of this. They won't bring charges. And so evidence obtained through illegal searches, seizures, like I was talking about, without proper Miranda warnings, hearsay evidence, unless, of course, there's some kind of exception that applies. But hearsay evidence it generally is not admissible. That will keep prosecutors from bringing charges. Okay, so with that, let's go back to your comments here. I'm actually going to go, let's see. Oh, yeah, people are bringing up cases. Harmony Montgomery, right? Chris Watts. Yeah. Okay, the bishop says, Gavin, let's not forget the Woody Allen comment. This proves knowledge. I mean, so a defense attorney might say, does it though? Does it prove knowledge? Maybe it proves knowledge that Jen thought that Stefan might be in love with Madeline, but does it prove that Madeline was being abused by Stefan? Again, devil's advocate here. I deeply appreciate this comment, but does it? And a prosecutor will have to weigh that. Does it? Yeah. Okay. Next one. Gavin, can anyone bring a wrongful death civil charge? The answer to that question, the anyone part of it, is no. You must have standing to bring a wrongful death civil charge in every jurisdiction of which I'm aware. I can't go to the court and bring a wrongful death suit against, what's his name? I can't remember his name right now, because I believe that Rebecca Zahau was murdered. However, Rebecca Zahau's family could, because they had standing. Great question. She continues to comment, I think sending her daughter to sleep with her boyfriend should be enough that she should have known what was wrong and likely to end up badly. And yes, that the key phrase there is that she should have known, and therefore in a civil case that would apply, right? And who are people that are who may have standing in this? Well, I think probably the most obvious one would be Mr. Wallace. I think he probably would be the one that would be able to bring a wrongful death suit, a civil suit. I don't know what he would want to get out of it, because he wouldn't be able to get her incarcerated over it. So he might be going after it. Typically, it's after money in order to make it painful to the person. I don't know that Jen has anything. I mean, yeah, man, it's a great thought exercise, though. Thanks for that. Let's bring Maddie back up. Gonna keep on going. Yeah, Michael Harrison, Gavin, I wouldn't be surprised if Madeline's father hasn't gotten advice on a civil suit against Jennifer Soto. I think you're probably right about that. Okay, Gavin, what about neglect and facilitation? Again, I mean, the hardest part there is the mens rea component. They may be able to prove the actus reus, right, that she did neglect her daughter, but will they be able to prove that she knowingly and wantonly neglected her daughter? That's a higher burden. And we might all say, including me, of course she knowingly and wantonly neglected her daughter. Of course she did. But, I mean, to the legal standard, I think a prosecutor might have a hard time with it. That's all I'm saying. Great comment, guys. You guys are amazing. Let's see. He could make sure Jennifer Soto doesn't profit off the story. Oh, yeah. That's what they did to O.J. Simpson, right? So, yeah, he could get a judgment against her, and that judgment could include future earnings, and it definitely could be an order of the court that she may not profit off of her daughter's story. Great comment. Scoochie and Boo to Pooch. That may be the best YouTube name I've ever seen in my life. And I see great ones, guys. Scoochie and Boo to Pooch. Gavin, if she didn't know, it's negligence at best. If she did, it's basically trafficking. Well, yeah, trafficking is the kinder word. I used a different word for it. And I believe it. Like, I believe it to my core. I'm just saying it might be difficult for a prosecutor to prove that to a jury. Bree asks, Gavin, what about perjury? Okay. I don't know what the Florida statutes are. I don't believe perjury applies yet to Jennifer Soto, because I think perjury must be done under oath in a court of law. Now, she has been under oath, but I think what could be charged, if they can prove it and they can prove that she knowingly did it, would be misleading or misrepresenting to law enforcement, which is the equivalent, right? It's the outside of court equivalent. Possible. DC, Gavin, I struggle to understand how Jen says she only sent Maddie to sleep with Stefan a few times, but they uncovered all those photos. Yeah, 100%. Especially knowing that Jen was on disability. She was home. I mean, was Stefan taking her off in different places, taking Madeline to different places? Is that possible? Yeah, and actually, I didn't finish your question. So where did all this take place? Yeah, exactly. That's great. Aida Shah, JD, and then, as we know, Aida is a lawyer. That's what that JD stands for. And I will never know why we don't call lawyers doctors. You have a Juris Doctorate, but for some reason we don't do that. Anyway, Aida tells us, Gavin, there's no money. Jen has no money to pay a civil judgment. Suing her is pointless. And I think that if Mr. Wallace was going to civilly sue her, he would have to find an attorney that is willing to take the case, knowing that there's nothing there. I mean, it's not impossible to find a lawyer to do that, but that's tough. That would be really tough to do. Gavin, does anyone know what local public opinion is about Jen? You'd think they'd know more than we do about her. Yeah, I know that, and I don't think that we've talked about it yet here on the channel, but there is an interview with neighbors. We need to listen to that one. Okay. Dee Dee. This is a great comment. Gavin, I think Jennifer Soto dumped Stephen Stearns that last December because she found out about his fondness for her daughter. Then she bought his story of how he was in love with her. All right, so maybe this is something that an expert witness could say, after doing, interviews. A psychiatrist, for example, could talk to Jennifer and analyze Jennifer and diagnose Jennifer, and they could say that in their expert opinion, the fact that Jennifer broke up with Stephen is indicative that she knew that he was doing what he did to her. It depends on what Jennifer would say to that psychiatrist and what they would be able to get out, what that psychiatrist would be able to get out of her, and over how many conversations, right? It's possible. That mens rea component, guys, is the toughest one for me anyway. Having talked to the prosecutors and researched it like a good reporter that I am. I don't know that I'm that good, but like a good reporter, I did my best. Yeah, so let's see. Carlene, Gavin, I'm still waiting to hear the explanation of I can't have her sleeping with anymore. I can't risk it. Yeah, Stephanie made it to a live. Glad you're here. Okay, Kim Shaughnessy, listen to this. Gavin, I'm 1 hour from Orlando and no one is talking about this case. Like, let that sink in, guys, because if you, like me, find that comment shocking, that is an indication that you, like me, have been living in a bubble where we believe that everybody is looking at it. Okay, a couple more. Let me just... Yeah, Winona, Gavin, I don't doubt Maddie's dad could find a lawyer willing to go pro bono on the civil case. I think that's the hardest part. Well, pro bono, okay. I see what you're saying. I was thinking a different way. I don't know, guys. I've had too many interactions where I've had to pay a lawyer, and like lawyers and present company accepted, because we love you, Aida. But man, I think the first question I'm ever asked by somebody that I am engaging for something that's going on, it's usually professionally. The first question is, how are you going to pay me? Like, you'd have to find somebody who is in a very good place financially to be able to do that pro bono. I think it'd be hard. I really do. But I mean, again, professional quibbler here. I'm just quibbling. Okay. Let's see. Do you guys know about the fish tank? Let's bring up the fish tank. All right. Let's go to my last little part of kind of what I jotted down and researched in my conversations here. Okay. Here are reasons that Jennifer Soto may not have known, what Stephen Stearns was doing to her daughter. Give me just 1 second here, guys. Just need a cough drop and a drink of my oh look, it's all frosty because I have delicious RO ice now. Oh my goodness. I love my new water drop. I can't even tell you. Okay. All right. Here are a couple reasons that I think that Jennifer Soto may not have known what was going on. Okay. Number one, and with the caveat that I know that this isn't perfectly true, I just know that, or I just suspect that from Jennifer Soto's point of view, she would have thought that it was true. And that is Stearns didn't have a criminal record, right? I know that he did, but I also know that it was sealed, and people don't just go doing background checks to find criminal records on their romantic partners. And if it was sealed, she wouldn't have been able to know anyway. So that is one of the reasons where it would be reasonable to say to yourself, Jennifer didn't know. He didn't have a criminal record that was out there. He wasn't a registered offender. He appeared perfectly trustworthy. And again, guys, I don't necessarily believe this. I'm just saying, in fact, I don't believe it. I'm just saying these are from Jen's point of view. Okay. So yeah, many perpetrators there are perpetrators that don't have a criminal record. But it still would be reasonable for Jennifer to assume thinking that there's no criminal record. He's not a registered offender, that he was safe for her daughter. Okay. That's one thing. And then, the relationship, the perceived trustworthiness, I've known this guy for this many years. I've only known him to play with Tamagotchi and Warhammer, and he's been a good father figure. There would be that perceived trustworthiness in her life. So that could have led Jennifer to believe that he really just cared about Madeline and had her best interest in mind. He was kind of a paternal figure. Also, that trustworthiness may have come from grooming that Stefan did on both Jen and Madeline to gain their trust. I think there's a little hindsight bias here, guys. I think judging Jennifer Soto's actions in hindsight may unfairly ignore the realities of her knowledge at the time. Now, may is in caps, bold, underlined, asterisks around it, right? But we do have a little hindsight is 20/20 here. So there's that. I do think that Jennifer has some cognitive barriers. We talked about that with Beth Meeks. I think that there's some slow cognition on Jennifer's part. I think that she is emotionally slow as well. And I think it probably didn't help that she was in a long-term relationship, albeit on again, off again, but a long-term relationship with a professional gaslighter, right? But I think that her cognitive slowness, her emotional barriers probably could have clouded her judgment, clouded her knowledge. It could be that and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, but it could be that there were some community norms. And I don't mean community as in the people that live in that townhome complex, but in Jennifer Soto's circle of influence, it's possible that the behavior that you and I find asqueroso, man, it is the worst, right? It's disgusting. Maybe that has become normal in her life experience. And so I'm not going to give details on this, but as I grew up, what am I trying to say here? I want to give you the disclaimer that I was never abused. I only ever had loving parents and an awesome family. I won the genetic lottery in that way, right? But I also was pretty sheltered to things of the world because my parents loved me. And as I grew up, things that that are normal in everyday society were really foreign to me, and I could not understand them. Like it took, and I won't give specific instances here, but there were some real surprises in my life as I became a grown adult beyond the years that most people would have already figured those things out. So, maybe in her, the way that she was raised, it just wasn't in her, it wasn't in her ability to imagine what was happening to her daughter. Again, this is devil's advocate. I don't believe this for a second, but it's possible, right? And then I don't think we've heard any evidence. I really don't think that we have any clear evidence that Jennifer Soto knew. I think that there are things that we infer from some evidence, like the Woody Allen comment and the comment about, when she was shown the photo of Madeline and Stefan, one of the SA photos, she didn't call that evil, right? She was calling murder evil, but not that. So, that evidence is something that we can infer knowledge, but I don't know that it is clear evidence that you could take to a jury and convict Jen with that reasonable doubt standard. Okay? So that is the extent of what I have prepared. Let me just go back to comments here. Zach says, I live 45 minutes from Orlando. Kim Shaughnessy is speaking the truth. Yeah, nobody's talking about it. Crazy. Wow. Okay, it refreshed. I have to come up here real quick. Okay. DC says, I wonder if they could show the background in the pictures. Show the background in the pictures were in Jen's room, if that would change anything in regards to having some knowledge. I'm not sure, but how many people are involved in children SA in the state of Florida? Marie, I don't even know, but I think that Florida probably has the same stats as every other state, and it's surprisingly high. Helen, Gavin, if an hour away they're not talking about the case, it could be a good thing. They will need to have those people for a jury. Yes, indeed. Gavin, okay, well, why would Jen need immunity? Well, that is a great question. Because maybe police were... Man, after an hour and 8 minutes of talking this out, might be the best question. Well, if they don't have enough to charge her, why would she need immunity? Well, I don't think they would give her immunity if they knew they had something to charge her with. I think they would only give her immunity if they thought that they would get more out of her. But that's one of those questions that's making me go, that is really a great question. The Scoop says, Gavin, I think Dee Dee poses a great point on the reason for the breakup. We need to reach back and see if we can get a date of the text that Jennifer Soto sent to Stephen Stearns stating that she couldn't risk Madeline co-sleeping. Yep. Autumn, thank you very much for gifting a membership. You're awesome. Just scrolling through here. I know that we've been on here for a while. Seek justice. Sandra hates his face. Okay, here we go. Ready? Okay, that's enough. We're done. I gotta get us back. We're done. Okay. Yeah, I don't like looking at him much either. Built to help. Hola, señor. All things equal, if the popo doesn't think she's as involved as I have personally claimed, then it's likely she isn't, although she is definitely guilty of not taking care of Maddie. Aida, yes, he is a manipulator. His own parents said so. Yes. Limer, Gavin, but they all shared a bed. That's weird either way. It is weird. It's weird. Absolutely. As a mother, I would never, she would have said absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah. Parents, Zach says, parents who don't vet adults spending considerable time with their children are the first failed line of defense. Yeah. You know, I won't give details on this, but I know of a man who is guilty of abusing one victim, and he himself was abused by a neighbor down the street. And his mom told me one time, I just had no idea that stuff even existed. And I think that might be the reason why, it's one of the reasons why we have the channel, right? So that our eyes are opened. We don't want to be overly we don't want to be to the extreme in the way that we react to the knowledge that we have, but we should have knowledge that these things exist in the world so that we can be vigilant. Great comment, Zach. I'm just going to do a couple more. Dee Dee says, Gavin, I believe that she knew, but I also don't think she knew about CSAM. Okay. Sandra says, I think Jen is playing stupid. Okay. Dee Dee says she was groomed to believe he really was just in love with Maddie. She knew but thought it was a Romeo-Juliet thing. Maybe. Yep. Let's see. Gavin, if Stephen Stearns paid for anything using his profits from CSAM and Jennifer Stearns benefited from those purchases, is she tied in them? Man, that is a great question. I do not know. I don't know the answer to that question. My first thought is I hope not. Like in this case, I want her to be prosecuted, right? But let's say that, I don't know, my neighbor, say my neighbor was involved in CSAM and then he hired me to prune his trees. And it was the money that he got from CSAM that paid me to prune his trees. I hope that I wouldn't be held liable for that. I don't know. Of course, that's different than a domestic relationship, right? Zach says, Gavin, the answer is if she had no knowledge of it, she's at arm's length from any transaction. Yeah. One more, Dee Dee. What's the reason for the breakup the December before? I think that's when JS found out about them and she allowed them back in. Yeah, possible. Guys, thanks so much. This is a good conversation, and I appreciate those of you who made me think, right? Like, not quite sure about that one. Don't know. Well, I think that's a good time for us to stop. We're an hour and 15 minutes in. This is a little longer than most of my lives. I try to wrap up around an hour. I will be back tomorrow, and I've got a couple of things that I'm working on. So look for a live stream to be scheduled for tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That will be my last live stream of the week as we are headed out of state to go visit our daughter and son-in-law for the Thanksgiving holiday. I wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you spend it with those you love, your family, your friends, your pets. I hope that you all are well and grateful for the things that you have. I am deeply grateful for each one of you for supporting the channel. There's been some amazing growth in the channel over the last, basically over the last year, But before that, even, I mean, it's been amazing, and I'm deeply grateful for each one of you for making it possible for me to earn a little income by talking about these cases that are so important and learning so much along the way. If you like this content, you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Only if you like it, right? Only if you like it. Also, please remember to visit the website, gavinfish.com. There's always a link down below. You can see this case and others. And with that, guys, I shall bid you adieu. Thank you very much for spending this evening with me, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.